This is the Sharpen podcast. I'm Nick, and this is day 7 of walking through the Bible in 360 days. We've reached the end of the first week of walking through the whole Bible, and I hope you've benefited so far from our time together. Yesterday, Eliphaz gave us round 1 of bad advice dressed up as theology. And today, friend number 2 steps into the ring, and he's the shortest recorded man in the Bible, the shortest man in the Bible, because it's Bildad, the Shuhite. Obligatory dad joke inserted. Anyway, Eliphaz was at least somewhat gentle in his opening, but Bildad comes in a bit more direct, a bit more blunt. He's the kind of guy who thinks he's doing you a favor by not softening the blow. Maybe it's short man syndrome. And then we get Job's response. And Job says something in chapters 9 and 10 that no one around him has the ears to hear. He asks a question that is going to echo all the way to the New Testament, through the letters of Paul, through the Reformation, and right into the heart of the gospel itself. And here's the question to carry with you as you read through today's passages. Since nobody is without sin, and nobody can stand before a perfectly holy God as a righteous person, then what hope do I have? What hope do you have? What hope do any of us have? That's the question for today. Job chapters 8 through 10. Let's go. Let's get into the text. So, Bildad kicks off chapter 8 by basically asking Job, do you think God perverts justice? Do you think the Almighty gets things wrong? Look, his answer is no. God is perfectly just. And then, without missing a beat, Bildad uses that truth as a weapon. If God is just, he says, and your children have died, then your children must have sinned. He's trying to build a logical case here. He literally says that about Job's 10 dead kids. The logic is the punishment fits the crime, so there must have been a crime. Now, Bildad does hold out some hope for Job. He says, if you're pure and upright, then seek God, and God will restore you. He appeals to the wisdom of the ancients. Look at the old traditions. Look at what people have always believed. The principle is clear. The godly flourish like well-watered plants, and the wicked get cut down. So, get right with God, Job, and then things will turn around again. There's something deeply religious sounding about all of that, and it would go down well, I'm sure, at a lot of prayer meetings that you might have attended before, that you attend now. But again, and we have to keep coming back to this, God already told us at the start of the book that Job is blameless. Bildad's framework is not wrong in every way, but it is catastrophically wrong in this application. He's accusing an innocent man. And he used the deaths of that man's children to make his point. And then Job speaks in chapters 9 and 10. And Job starts by agreeing with Bildad on the one thing that Bildad got right. He says, and this is in chapter 9, verse 2, he says one of the most loaded sentences in the whole book. His question is this: how can a man be righteous before God? Just go back and read that again. Job isn't saying that God is unjust. He's saying the very opposite. He's saying that God is so perfectly, overwhelmingly just that the very idea of standing before him as a righteous man and winning your case is ridiculously absurd. He goes on, if God wanted to contend with you, You couldn't answer one question out of 1,000 that he put to you. He is the one who moves mountains, who commands the sunrise, who walks on the waves of the sea. His power is incomprehensible. His wisdom is beyond anything that we can contain. If you tried to take him to court, he would be your judge, he would be your prosecutor, the standard of righteousness, and he will be your executioner all at once. And then Job says something in verse 33 that I think it's like a train. He says, I wish that there was someone to arbitrate between us. Someone who can lay his hand on both of us, on God and on me, and bring us together. In his mind, there's no such person. There's no one who can bridge that gap. And then in chapter 10, Job swings between two almost contradictory places. He challenges God directly. Tell me why you're contending with me. Does it please you to oppress me? You made me with your own hands. You shaped me like clay. And now you're hunting me like a lion. Job is desperate. He's confused and he wants an answer. But underneath all of the anger, there's also something incredibly tender. He says to God, your hands shaped me and made me, and now you turn and destroy me. There's almost a grief in it, like a son who can't understand why his father seems to have turned against him. By the end of chapter 10, Job hasn't found any answers. He hasn't received any explanation. He just asks God to leave him alone long enough for him to find a moment of comfort before he dies. It's a hard read. It's a hard read, guys. But stay with it because it's leading somewhere. Let's go into the gospel connections in our text today. So Job asks the question in chapter 9, verse 2. How can a man be right before God? He knows the problem. All of us have sinned. How can any one of us stand before a holy and righteous God? I want to submit to you that this is one of the most important questions in the entire Bible. And the reason it's so important is not just because it's hard. It's because the rest of Scripture spends the next several thousand pages answering that question. Think about what the question assumes. It assumes that God is genuinely and absolutely holy. And He is. His standard of righteousness is not negotiable and it's not curved. It can't be bent. It can't be negotiated with. There is no such thing as being good enough on your own to stand before God. If you walked into a courtroom with God as judge and you tried to make your case for why you deserve to stand in His presence as a righteous person, you would absolutely lose. And not narrowly. And not because you had a bad lawyer, but because the gap between what He is and what we are is unbridgeable from our side of the table. The Heidelberg Catechism, one of the great Reformed confessions, asks exactly this question. It asks, can we make the satisfaction for our own sin ourselves? Can we pay for our sin ourselves? And the answer is no, we can't. Not only do we fall short, but every day that we live, we add to the debt. We cannot dig ourselves out of it, guys. No amount of effort, no religious performance, no moral improvement program gets you to the standard required by a perfectly holy God. That's the fact, that's the reality. So what's the answer? The Catechism asks, what kind of mediator and deliverer do we need? And it answers, one who is truly human and perfectly righteous, and yet also God. Because only someone who is genuinely human can represent humanity. But only someone who is genuinely God can satisfy the demands of divine justice and actually bridge that gap. And here's where Job 9 becomes one of the most amazing prophetic passages in the Old Testament. Job cries out, I wish there were an arbitrator, someone who could lay his hand on both of us, on me and on God, someone to stand between a holy God and a broken man and make peace. And guys, that is Jesus Christ to the letter. 4,000 years before Paul wrote Romans chapter 3, which tells us that all have sinned and all have fallen short of the glory of God, Romans 3:23. Job is already feeling the full weight of that problem. He can see the gap. He can feel the impossibility. And he cries out for something that he can only half imagine. A mediator. Someone fully in both worlds. Someone who could reach to God with one hand and reach to man with the other. The New Testament gives that person a name. There is one God and one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5. That's it. That's exactly what Job was crying out for. And that mediator didn't just lay a hand on both parties. He became one of the parties. He became one of us. He is God in the flesh. He took on flesh, lived the perfect, righteous life that Job couldn't live, that you and I couldn't live. And he died the death that our sin deserves and walked out of the tomb on the other side, leaving that gap closed, leaving the case settled, leaving sinners who trust in him declared righteous, not because they are in themselves, but because they are clothed in his righteousness. Job asked the right question, and the gospel is the answer. So, 3 things to take with you today from this passage, from these chapters. First, Job's question is your question too, whether you know it or not. Every person who has ever lived, if they're honest, is eventually confronted with some version of this. Am I good enough? Do I measure up? What happens when I die and have to give an account? Some people push that down and distract themselves. Some people try and earn their way through religious performance. Some people just decide not to think about it. But Job couldn't avoid it, and neither can we. The good news is that asking that question honestly is the first step to finding the real answer. The person who never asks, how can I be righteous before God, is the person who thinks that they already are righteous before God. And that is the most dangerous place that you can be. Pride and self-righteousness are the biggest obstacles to the gospel. Job's desperate honesty puts him closer to grace than Bildad's confident theology does. Secondly, guys, stop trying to be your own mediator. One of the most universal human instincts is to try to manage our own standing before God through our effort, through improvement, through self-improvement, through being a better person. We don't usually put it in those words, but that's what we're trying to do every time that we think things like, God will forgive me because I'm basically a decent guy. Or I try to treat people well, so I think I'm okay. Or I've done more good than bad in my life. That's you trying to be your own umpire. That's you trying to be your own mediator. And it doesn't work. Not because God is cruel, but because his holiness is real. And your goodness is not the standard. Your friends are not the standard. Your pastor isn't the standard. God is the standard. His holiness is the standard. So the only way to be righteous before God is to be given a righteousness that is not yours, that you didn't earn. That's the whole point. Christ's righteousness credited to you through faith. That's the answer to Job's question. Now, thirdly and lastly, the mediator that you need already came. And the case is already settled, guys. Job cried out into what felt like an empty sky. He wanted someone to stand between him and God, and there was no one yet. He was on the near side of the cross, feeling the full weight of the problem without any access to the full answer. We are so fortunate. We are not in that position. We live after the resurrection. The mediator came. He completed the work. And he is right now, at this very moment in time, at the right hand of God, appearing in the presence of the Father for us, as Hebrews chapter 9, verse 24 puts it. And it's not because we earned it, but because he earned it for us. So if you're in a dark place today, if you feel like God is far away, or like you're not good enough, or like your past disqualifies you, you are in the same place that Job was in chapter 9. You're feeling that gap. You're feeling that distance. And you're longing for a mediator. And here's what you need to know. The mediator is not coming. He already came. He's already there. And if you trust him, then, my friends, that gap is already closed. So that's it for day 7, guys. Thank you for joining me today. Tomorrow we're in Job chapters 11 through 14. And the third friend, Zophar, has his turn. And Zophar is, frankly, the harshest of the three guys, of the three friends. And Job's response goes even deeper. He starts to wrestle with what it means to live and die as a man under God. And there's a moment in chapter 14 that's going to absolutely stop you in your tracks. So don't miss that. And once again, if you're getting something out of this podcast, please remember to subscribe and follow and share it with your friends. Leave a comment below as well. Let me know what you think. Share it with somebody who's trying to read the Bible today, guys. That's it for today. Thank you for joining me. See you tomorrow. God bless.